Hey, welcome back to the program here on Coastal Daybreak on the talk station, FM 107 and AM 1240. Coming up, we'll be talking with John Feinstein, the author of Season on the Brink and A Good Walk Spoiled. Also, actually a wonderful book about baseball called Where Nobody Knows Your Name, about minor league baseball. His new book is called The Legends Club, about Dean Smith, Mike Krzyzewski, and Jim Valvano, an epic college basketball rivalry between those three on Tobacco Road. And we're going to get to that as soon as we can get up with him. We're trying to make that connection now. In the meantime, a couple of things for you to know. For example, if you're trying to find some stuff to do this weekend, there's a lot of good things that are out there for the weekend. For example, the Shamrock and St. Patrick's celebration of the Farmers Market in New Bern getting started this evening, and the 5th Annual International Film Series at Carteret Community College at Jocelyn Hall this evening there as well. See, what else do we have? Justin Castellano playing at Herica's. I'm looking way ahead into March 18th. What am I doing? I'm looking way ahead. Some people are going, what? No. People planning that. Oh, sorry. Outer Banks Philharmonic, wonderful band, playing at Clausen's coming up tonight. Barstow and the Revamps in Beaufort at Crew Wine Bar. Carolina All-Star Salsa Orchestra in Jacksonville at the Loyal Order of the Moose, and then again later on at Champs Lounge, and then Jim Quick and Coastline Band playing at Salt Ultra Lounge. Those are all tonight, and that's on our schedule. I was adding stuff in later in the schedule, so I was on the wrong page. So I scared some people about some things.
Good job, Ben. Tonight.
Oh, me. All right. Well, we were waiting for John to join us, and John's joining us now, too, because just love this guy. His commentating is great on TV, but his pen and ink is even better. The books that are some of my favorites, The Season on the Brink, and also the Good Walk Spoiled, and now the Legends Club joins the several, also minor league baseball book about the Where Nobody Knows Your Name. Wonderful books. John Feinstein joins us now. The new book, The Legends Club, Dean Smith, Mike Krzyzewski, Jim Valvano, and an epic college basketball rivalry. John, welcome to the program.
Ben, good morning. Good to talk to you. Thanks.
Yeah, it's good to have you back on. This is, of course, here in eastern North Carolina. We may be a little bit insulated from what goes on in Tobacco Road, but I grew up in Durham, right down the street, from on University Drive, from Duke. My parents were both Carolina grads, so we were steeped in this rivalry between the three, and the earlier coaches, Vic Bubis and on earlier. But tell us about this. What makes this special in college basketball?
Well, I think if you think back to the 1980s, Ben, which is when I got to know all three of these guys as a very young reporter at the Washington Post, you're talking about two guys, Dean Smith and Mike Krzyzewski, who without doubt are on coaching's Mount Rushmore, along with, I think, John Wooden and Bob Knight.
Right.
And then you're talking about Jim Valvano, who has this unique niche in the pantheon of college basketball, partly because he won that incredible national title that has been talked about and written about for the last 33 years, but also because of the way he died, frankly. When he was diagnosed with cancer in the summer of 1992, and the doctors gave him a year to live, he didn't want his death to be meaningless. And during that last year, Mike Krzyzewski says he did his best coaching job, because he set up the V Foundation and he talked to people like Krzyzewski and John Saunders at ESPN, who was a close friend, and said, this is what you're going to do, and this is how you're going to build it, and this is who you're going to get involved, and set the whole thing up literally in his hospital room while he was dying. And that leaves a unique legacy. And they were also, and again, I was so lucky because I was with Krzyzewski for hours and hours. I was with Valvano for hours and hours. I used to sit in his office after games at 3 a.m, and he would stretch out on his couch after they won the national title and say, okay, I've done coaching. What am I going to be when I grow up? Because he really felt that way. He won the national title at 37. No one under 40 has won it since. And unlike Krzyzewski and Dean, who were coaching lifers, who the minute they won a national title started thinking, how do I win a second one? His thought was, okay, I've done coaching, what do I do next? But I got to spend all these hours with these guys, and it occurred to me when I came up with the idea for this book, there has never been a circumstance like that anywhere in sports where you had three such giant and unique figures, because they were all such different personalities,
very different.
Coaching against one another at the same time in the same community, as you said.
Oh yeah, within 15 miles of each other. Just an incredible twist of fate to bring them all together at the same time. But we look at the kind of their roots as well. They share some things, but there's some other parts that bring them together too. It's just and you write about it in here about the fans. That's one of the things I think is that you have the Cameron Crazies, you had the Wine and Cheese crowd at Carolina, or you might have the old noise meter at the old Reynolds Coliseum. And in the 80s, those were all big things. As Dean Dome was opening up, you had the incredible run again of Jimmy V's team. In the 80s, just a magical time for college basketball.
Well, it was, particularly down here. If you think about it, the real rise of college basketball took place in the 80s when the tournament went from NBC to CBS, and CBS started televising more games, and ESPN was coming into its own.
Right.
And in 82, you had one of the greatest championship games, which was Michael Jordan making the shot for Carolina. Excuse me. A year later, you had an even greater championship game when Lorenzo Charles dunked off of Derek Whittenberg's alleged pass, as I like to call it. And then a couple of years later, Duke started going to the Final Four every year. In 86, they went 6 years out of 7 and 7 out of 9, and finally won those 2 back-to-back titles in 91 and 92. So Duke, Carolina, and NC State were right at the heart of this rise of college basketball with these 3 remarkable coaches and 3 remarkable men. And that's why I think their legacy, as I said, is unique, and which is why I wanted to do the book. But what the book is about a lot is their relationships and how they changed. Mike and Dean were very antagonistic to one another in the early days when Mike first got down here from Army. There was the non-handshake that I described the first time they played against each other in 1980. There was the double standard game in 84. There was a time when Krzyzewski told his assistants, if I ever start to behave like him, get a gun and shoot me. And years later, when he started to become dean, I would call him on occasion, and I would just leave a message and say, we're rounding up the guns, because he became more and more like Dean and finally accepted it and realized, and that's when he and Dean started to become much closer, when Mike understood what it was like to be the target, what it was like to be the icon, what it was like to be the guy who everybody said there was a double standard for. Because now people say, oh, Duke gets all the calls. In the old days, everybody said Carolina got all the calls.
Yeah, now tell me about the double standard game, because I was in WRDU in Raleigh then. What was that? Tell us about
It was in 1984. It was Krzyzewski's first good team. It was when Jay Billis and Johnny Dawkins and Mark Gallery and David Henderson were sophomores. Tommy Amaker was the freshman point guard. And very close game in Cameron. Jordan and Perkins are playing for Carolina. And at one point during the game, Dean thought that the people at the Duke scorers table weren't letting the refs know that he wanted to get a sub in, because they didn't see the sub somehow.
Right.
And he ran to the scorers table and trying to hit the buzzer to let the officials know, the horn to let the officials know that they should let a sub in, he hit the scoreboard and put 10 points on the scoreboard for Carolina. And, Krzyzewski went nuts and was saying, you got to give him a technical for that. He can't be messing with the scorers table. And the refs didn't. Carolina won the game. Mike ended up getting teed up before the end of the game.
Yeah.
And after the game, Mike said, there's a double standard in this league. There's one for Dean and there's one for the rest of us. And Dean went ballistic. I mean, he was still angry about it 25 years later. It was see, Dean was right, because it's not that there's a double standard. It's that when you have better players, they make plays. So they tend to get calls, or sometimes it looks like they're getting calls. And when you're Dean Smith, you get more leeway from the officials. Now, when you're Mike Krzyzewski, you get more leeway from the officials. But Mike was a young coach trying to build this program. And the interesting thing is, where they finally found the common ground was each realized that they were doing the same thing. They were standing up for their players.
Yep.
Dean didn't want people to demean the accomplishments of his players by saying the refs won games. Mike wanted his players to get every break they could because they were trying to climb the ladder. And the funny story, later that season when Duke and Carolina played in the ACC tournament, after Carolina had won in double overtime in Carmichael, Krzyzewski before the game said to his players, now look, fellas, we're the better team. When we win this game, I don't want to see any celebrating. Just walk off the court like you knew it was going to happen. So Duke wins the game 77-75. It was a great game. Game ends, and Mark Gallery and Jay Billis tell the story that they say, okay, it's good, we won, but we're not celebrating. We're just going to walk off the court. They turn around, Krzyzewski's at midcourt hugging Johnny Dawkins. And Johnny said to Mike, Coach, what are you doing? We weren't celebrating. Mike said, blanket. We beat Carolina.
Yeah, you're going to celebrate when you win that game. Now,
yeah, and he was at that point going into that game 1-8 against Dean and hadn't beaten him since his first year, so it was a big deal.
You had Dean Smith was well known for being also a social justice person. Also cared about his players. He wanted them. He was upset if a player left early. I think the first one who to leave early, was on his bad list for a long time. That didn't
McAdoo.
go. Yeah, McAdoo. That didn't go back and get his degree.
Right.
But then you had, on the other hand, Jimmy V, who was often criticized for players that had terrible grades or they didn't care anything about it. And I don't know. I'm not sure exactly where Coach K stood in there, but except that it was Duke. So.
Well, yeah. I mean, you can't coach at Duke and not have your players who stay 4 years graduate. Of course, the one and done is a completely different kettle of fish. But,
right.
As I said before, when Jim won the national championship, he wandered. He was looking for the next thing. Did he want to coach? Did he want to coach in the NBA? Did he want to do television? Did he want to do stand-up comedy? He tried them all, except for coaching in the NBA, although he flirted with it on a couple of occasions.
Well, he flirted with it and then kind of parlayed that into the AD job.
Exactly right, when the Knicks were interested in hiring him. He also almost took the Nets job after he left NC State. And because he wasn't paying as much attention as he should have, they brought in some kids who, frankly, just didn't belong there, especially at a time when you were expected to stay 3 or 4 years and advance toward a degree. Now, that's all changed now in this era, as we know.
But, of course, the Duke crowd also knew this, too. That's where the pizza box incident, I think,
Well, that was different. That was Lorenzo Charles after they won the national championship. He and a bunch of guys, I guess they'd had too much to drink, stole a bunch of pizzas from a Domino's pizza delivery guy, and when before the game the next year, of course, here comes the Domino's guys with 20 pizzas for Mr. Charles, and Valvano simply paid for the pizzas and handed them out to the students, which I thought was brilliant.
Yeah.
But Jim would tell you later that he didn't pay enough attention, and it was all about that looking for the next thing, and the tragedy in his life was the next thing for him was cancer.
Yeah.
That's when he finally found focus again.
And you also saw a state, I think, suffer later too. I mean, they went through some pretty down years.
Oh yeah, I mean, because the legislature got involved and the Board of Ed got involved, and for a while there it was tougher to get into state than almost any school in the country as an athlete. And Les Robinson sort of had his hands tied behind his back when he came in. He had one good year when Corgiani and Monroe were still there, and then they faded, and they have not been the same since. They've had some good teams. They've had some Sweet 16 teams. Herb Sendek went to the tournament 5 years in a row. But Pam Valvano said something very interesting to me, though, and she still lives in Cary, that she believes that it's very tough for anybody, whether it was Les Robinson, whether it was Herb Sendek, whether it was Sidney Lowe, who, of course, was part of that era with V, or Mark Gottfried now, to be the coach of state, because Jim's shadow is still there. He's still a giant figure. He's still alive to most people because they see the ESPY speech every year. They see the run in Albuquerque every year. And Dean certainly cast a long shadow when he left, and Mike will cast a long shadow when he leaves, but Jim is still alive in the minds of many fans.
John Feinstein, the author of Season on the Brink, the new book is called The Legends Club, Dean Smith, Mike Krzyzewski, Jim Valvano, and an epic college basketball rivalry. I don't know if you've ever heard this, but around the Triangle, it was when Les Robinson was coaching, it was when the NCAA added in the extra game. We used to call it the Les Robinson Memorial Play-In game.
Well, and to Les's credit, in 1996, which was his last year, they won that 8-9 game in the ACC tournament, and he came in afterwards and said, if they name a game after you, you ought to win it once.
Yeah, there you go. John Feinstein, The Legends Club. John, a pleasure talking with you.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it, Ben. Take care.
This is Coastal Daybreak here on the talk station, FM 107 and AM 1240. More to come in a moment. We can tune Mandy back in now, so we're not talking sports.
Huh?
and we get her back on the show here now. As we got the kids with the weather coming up also, and I'm stopped here now, so I'm looking at you. You're still kind of in a blank stare.
It takes me a minute.
Swap Shop Light coming up next.